Welcome back to Before Work Podcast, episode 10. We've hit double digits. We've done it, everybody. We did it. Congratulations to us. We're proud. Follow us on Twitter at Before Work Pod. Listen to us on Apple, Spotify, or Google Play. And as always, email your questions to beforeworkpodcast@gmail.com. We got some shout outs to make today, don't we?
Oh, yeah. We got some people far and wide listening to us.
Far and wide. We're nationwide at this point.
Yeah, nationwide, from coast to coast here.
From coast to coast, if that coast is Michigan, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. We want to thank you all for listening.
We do have that California listen.
We do have California as well.
That's what I mean. We went coast to coast.
We literally were coast to coast. In the past couple of weeks, we have put some people up in Michigan that really are
listening.
They're really, really listening. We are close to triple-digit downloads as well, which is pretty exciting. We appreciate that. And we're happy that you were on this journey with us through your time before work. Hopefully you're getting ready right now, probably post-shower, probably on your drive in. And we just want to say, hey, look at the road.
Yeah, pay attention while you're driving, please.
Pay attention while you're driving.
Luckily, this is an audio experience, so they're not watching anything.
Right.
And they can't respond, so there's not texting back. There's no open chat.
True.
So please keep your eyes on the road. Except when you sneeze, please don't try to keep your eyes open when you sneeze. You might lose them.
Yeah, it's tough. Although, I guess if people did have a Tesla self-driving car and we did come up with a video cast, they would be able to listen/watch.
Yeah, so that's be dangerous for me because I'd be like so tempted.
Have you seen videos of people driving Teslas while the car is driving itself?
Yeah,
it's weird.
There was a news report.
Was there a crash?
No, of a guy. There's video of a guy. He's on a highway. His car's doing 75, and he's asleep, 100% asleep, just completely unconscious.
Oh, it's so weird. It's so weird. I was watching a video probably in the last couple of weeks. It was it was someone out in California. They were in like their early 20s. It was boys. I'm sure that they hit some sort of internet YouTube channel that made the millions, but they were recording themselves like playing cards, and like just the driver seat individual was just completely back turned to the road, just talking. It was so bizarre to watch. Yeah, because again, our minds are just not used to seeing something like that, or seeing that just seeing a driver not actually hands on the wheel is weird.
Like that to me is better than someone sleeping, because someone sleeping
you have no reaction time.
You have no reaction time. And so this person having like a long commute, like he knew, I got 30 minutes. I'm going to be on the same road, just pretty much going straight. So I'm just going to set my alarm for 25 minutes, you know, and just conk out here. And I'll wake up and we'll go to what? So I don't know.
It's weird where the Tesla, you'd think in like if you're going 70 miles an hour, it just seems so darn dangerous. But where the Tesla, or I should say self-driving cars that use sensors is so useful is in bumper-to-bumper traffic. When, you're going every 20 seconds, you're going 10 feet, and like you see the car in front of you start to move. So you think to yourself, okay, I'm going to go 10 feet, but you look over to grab something, and then they stopped, and you keep going. That's where the Tesla would come so in handy.
Yeah,
because it would stop you.
So many fender benders are in that, and like that's where you're always just like, come on, people.
Right.
But also, I mean, automatics make this better, but nothing's worse than bumper to bumper traffic in a manual transmission car.
Oh, it'd be terrible.
And your legs just dying. You're screaming from pumping that clutch back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, just going a little bit, and you got to keep yourself. You got to keep yourself close because you don't want that ding dong in his lifted pickup truck trying to cut in front of you. It's just,
are manual cars, they're becoming more and more obsolete. Like companies aren't making them as much.
Oh yeah, there's so many car companies that have dropped them in the United States. They're still fairly plentiful in other countries. Europe a lot and Australia, but even there, they're slowly becoming less and less. Part of it's just because you can get a lot more fuel economy out of automatic, especially with the new CVT stuff, and also you have better performance. Like honestly, you can get better speed performance out of an automatic transmission than a manual transmission in a lot of ways because of it can shift faster than a human, and it can shift more accurately than a human.
So I'm guessing that manual cars will be no longer won't be made at some point.
Yeah.
Like there might be that obscure company that will always make manual cars, but they're going to My lips bleeding. They're going to stop making them at some point, or at least stop making them in mass.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I mean, the other problem is that the people who like to drive manual transmissions are not
Love to drive manual transmissions,
but they aren't the people who are buying new cars. Most people who like manual transmissions are buying used cars, and companies don't give two craps about the used car people because they're making new cars. They're like, what's going to sell the third time this car sells? They're just care about what sells now.
Exactly.
So,
but people that are about manual, like, because are you typically always a manual?
Well, I like manual transmissions for when I'm driving for the sake of driving. Automatics are a lot more convenient because, well, they're convenient. I mean, so I like manual transmissions. I especially like them in cars that I'm driving for fun. So my fun car that I have is more of a manual transmission. But yeah, the torque converter is a very handy thing. Like, actually, honestly, a really fun compromise is is like a sequentially shifting manual automatic ones. Like they a lot is like in drag cars where like you control what gear you're in, but but there's no clutch or anything. You're just like paddle shifting and stuff. Like
your car never stalls out. Like
so that's a fun compromise. But I mean, there is nothing that you do feel way more connected to the car when you have a clutch that you're controlling when you're engaging your transmission and what gear you're in and all that stuff. So it's super fun. Like when you learn that and you get to drive that, but when you're driving like a commute, oh man, that'd be brutal. Like I can't imagine people who live in hilly cities that drive manual transmission. Like I can't imagine San Francisco.
I was just gonna say San Francisco.
And you're in bumping over traffic, but you're like nearly looking straight up because you're on this super steep incline.
You're also on a roller coaster.
Yeah, you're on the super steep incline.
You're on the initial ascent of the roller coaster.
And your car's just weeping as you just have to just burn the clutch to be able to get going on this thing. Like, and you're just like, oops, stop. That's where like that stuff can be ridiculously annoying. But
yeah, goodness. But
again, I think that as long as there is a market for manual transmissions, they will do it. Like people think that like car companies are trying to push people away from them. They're not really. They do what sells. Like car companies they're always on the edge. Like car companies is not something. It's not like back in the day.
I'd say more than other industries, car companies are pretty much always a couple steps ahead.
Like they're just always trying to just do what people want to buy. Like they're not trying to push anything. They really like. If people didn't want electric cars, we would not really have electric cars. If people didn't want, oh, Evan just broke himself on the table. Oh, he's dying. Oh,
just hit my elbow so hard.
Anyways, yeah, if people didn't want things like no one's gonna be like, all right, guys, you know what we're gonna try to do this year? 5-wheeled car.
Yeah, right.
I know. No one really has asked for this, but we're really going to try. But no, they're going to stick with what works and what's going to sell. And even then, like they'll do tons of research and come up with like the perfect car, what they think based on their research, and it still doesn't sell. Like it's just how it is. Like you can't.
You know what's crazy? How far ahead car companies are with their product, which is vehicles. But I think of like the government and how 5 steps behind they are in being efficient and giving people what they want. It's so interesting.
Yeah. It's just no one's ever like, hey, you guys hear about that really good Russian car or that really good North Korean car? Yeah, governments that are in control of that kind of stuff, they don't really make cool stuff.
Yeah.
So
it's so true. The government does not make cool things.
Yeah, no. But
speaking of commutes and cars and things that cars have in them, speaking of radios and music.
Oh yeah, the nice segue there. But Evan's segueing to, which actually I do have a question. The term segue, did that come because of the segue, or did they call it a segue because of a segue? Because I really can't think of a term. I can't think of segue being used in my memory before I knew about what a segue was. And honestly, it probably is the product is called segue because segue, but it wouldn't surprise me. The English language, especially American English, is one of those weird things where we just pick up words and just use them and don't even think about why. While Evan is looking that up. Anyways, listening to music this week.
Segue is not the word. It's not the item or the product. It's actually spelled Segue. That's so
French.
Actually, hold on. I think it's at Italian.
Italian?
It's real Italian.
That fits for you, I guess.
Oh yeah, it's super Italian. So again, the word that is used to transition conversation is spelled SEGUE, the product that gets you from location to location, and mall cops across America use SEGWAY. Very interesting.
Yeah.
I never knew that.
Huh.
Wow.
I
The more you know.
Yeah, okay. So back to our current segue, which we got segued out of our segue, now we're segueing back to our segue, is I was listening to some music and I got the song, and I actually didn't tell you this part, but I always like to reference the song "It's Been a While" by Stained. Pretty much anytime anyone says "It's been a while," because
It's been a while.
Just because first of all the song is funny, and also just because it's a very easily used reference, because people use that term "it's been a while" a lot, and so I was like, you know what I'm craving right now? I want to listen to some early 2000s alternative rock.
Oh yeah.
So I just went to my Apple Music and said, let's just type this in.
Your ears said thank you.
I just literally typed in early 2000s alternative rock, and there was some playlists made by other people, and I just went to the most popular one, and this dude had it on point. I mean, there was Linkin Park, there was Good Charlotte, there was Stained,
was Creed on there?
There was Creed, there was Hinder,
Yeah.
there was a couple Nickelback songs which I always just kind of skipped,
Right.
And there was Three Doors Down.
Oh my.
There was some Sum 41.
Yeah.
It was a good plethora of music, all that I knew all the words to. It was
yeah.
amazing. And
It was fun to grow up with that music.
and I honestly just hit shuffle on the playlist once I confirmed that "It's Been a While" was on there, because I wanted to see how long it took till that song came up. And I mean, it took a little while, but I was jamming the whole way. I mean, and you just listen to some of these bands and you're just like, this was on the radio. Like, a lot of it was on the radio.
Yeah.
And it's just so ridiculously good in its own. Again, it's not like musically complex or like, whoa.
Right.
And most of them all sing the same way. There was like 3 different voice styles. You had like the Creed, like, and then you had like the super whiny.
Yes,
Good Charlotte,
which started kind of like the whining, like alternative rock meets punk a little bit.
Yeah, and then you had just some like kind of more traditional normal voice singing. I don't know. I guess maybe that's even a style. But I mean, you had like they kind of like that where you had like the metal meets like hip hop music of like Linkin Park and Limp Bizkit and like
Limp Bizkit.
POD. Yeah, you had that on there too. It was a good plethora of music,
Sure.
and I jammed to it. I listened to, and again, there was like a bunch of songs, but I just jammed to it like all day. It was again, music was so much better then.
It was so much better, and the late '90s. I should even say the whole decade of the '90s into the early 2000s till again like the 05, 06, 07 era was this transition in music from the '80s rock into the 2000s pop, which is the trash that we're unfortunately dealing with today. So in that time though, like you had this transition where you had really good rock music mixed with the alternative aspects of rock, and then you had punk thrown in there. But you had these artists that were playing their own instruments, writing their own lyrics, going on tour, and they actually appreciated their music, and they had everything to do with their music. Whereas now, again, you have an incredible amount of branding artists that have 40 writers for a stinking song.
Yeah.
Again, it was just back like, again, when we were growing up, you just had these artists and and it was bands that had been on the road together since they were 17. They wrote their own music, had their own lyrics. They like sold merch at shows, and like, it was just much more real. It was much more emotion filled.
I think a lot of that was fueled by the MP3 player, like the iPod,
Yes.
because before that you listened to music via the radio, and if you wanted to listen to music other than that, you had to buy physical
go
copies.
buy the CD.
And it was difficult because you didn't have all the music at your fingertips. You had to go to a record store or a CD store, and you had to like pick through stuff, and you really or you did like those like online subscription ones where you'd like they give you CDs
Yep,
through the mail, and you'd like pick through a catalog. And again, the catalog is not going to have every music artist ever. It wasn't as available in that way. And so I think when you had that push into online music and people could buy the music online if they purchased it, and listen to it that way and like sample stuff and like try things.
Right.
I mean, music sharing, people shared their music with each other, which again, whatever.
Right.
But I think that fueled this desire to have different music. People had to like develop their own taste where like you didn't have to wait for your favorite song to come on the radio or whatever, and you'd have to listen to the other garbage along the way. Or and if you wanted to start listening to more eclectic music, it was more accessible. And so you had that, and so I think there was that big push, and that's where that all kind of came from. Like people could just listen to their own music and like more new music. So the radio was following the trends of what people wanted, and then they realized that wasn't as sustainable. So then they just started taking back control and giving us hot garbage again.
It's so crazy how bad music is. Again, everything's singles. I've told you this before. Everything is the remix. So like pop music today, the release of music is what would have been the remix 10, 15 years ago, which just frustrates me because it just means that we're getting further and further disconnected from the actual meaning of music and the meaning of song. And like, there's no... So again, I'm pretty sure Ed Sheeran still writes his own stuff.
He also writes for a lot of other people,
and he writes for other people. Like, but again, that's the point. He's writing for all these other bands, and not even bands, for all these other artists. And so it's just so many branding artists that they're not connected to their music. They're connected to making money off their music. And again, just like what you were saying, I get taken back to like in sixth grade. I had a year-end graduation party for everyone in my class that graduated sixth grade. And for those that didn't, but we still invited them. I remember making the mixtape for that, and like you had, and it was like, okay, you felt what you wanted that mix. Like again, kids today don't know what making a mixtape is, and like I remember being able to like piece together music that I really enjoyed and that I knew was like in that time, and you could like make this album yourself basically, and like that's not something that happens anymore. Like I remember, my friends and I would buy CDs, and I'm sure that you can relate to this for like sleepovers or whatever. Like you'd pop the CD in your PS1 or your PS2 or a CD player, and then like while you guys were playing or doing whatever, you just have the music on the background on your CD, and it was and you'd listen to an entire album, and we've talked about this before. Listening to albums today just doesn't really exist.
Well, except for albums don't really exist.
Yeah, albums don't really exist, but like. Unless it's people I feel like our age or older that are willing to sit down and listen to an album. But I do agree, the invention of the MP3 player and having all those songs in your pocket kind of has led away from that because you don't have to, if you want to choose a different artist on, just by using your thumb, which I still use. The iPod Classic with the click wheel is my go-to MP3 player. I love it so much. How about the fact that MP3 players aren't really even a thing anymore? It's now just all phones.
Well, yeah. I mean, music streaming is now the thing. I mean, like people don't need to have all the music digitally physically stored. They can have it streamed to their phone, which that's what I do. I don't really like. I have music on my phone that I have on there because it's music that I know that I'm going to listen to all the time. And I don't feel like spending my data that I get per month on that. But there's plenty of times where I'm just like, I'll just listen to whatever, and I'm not going to download it on my phone because I'll just stream it.
So I still only own music. So yeah, I'm not gonna lie. Some of the music I have from when I was a kid was pirated, but as far as today, like I still only use, that won't get me in trouble, right?
Whatever.
Whatever. I still only use music that I own. So again, whether it's CDs or on my iPod Classic, which I don't think I haven't added songs to my iPod Classic, which I got in 2007 and still works like a charm. I haven't added music to that in like 5 years, maybe.
Oh yeah,
like it's been a long time.
Hopefully, people in Michigan won't report us. I think they're appreciative
Michigan.
Michigan.
Yeah, represent Michigan.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just a bunch of Detroit people.
Yeah, Detroit.
Maybe the wild packs of dogs that rummage through Detroit.
They start to listen to podcasts now. But I have my iPod still. I don't really use it just because. It's not always the most convenient. Again, my phone is just with me, and I always install just cheap head units into my cars, and I have enough now that whenever I buy and sell cars, I just take them out and swap in their old CD players that I kept from them. But yeah, it's definitely interesting. You just think like people at the same time have access to everything music wise, like literally anything and everything. You can go onto stuff that's not even made by a record label. Like you can go onto SoundCloud and listen to some of the weirdest music I've ever experienced is on there. Yeah. And then at the same time, all the music that like wins awards and is on the radio is like the same song, just basically done very differently with slightly different inappropriate lyrics. Sure. And it's just like,
which you would think that because of that fact, because music is more available now than it's ever been, that new music that's made by artists and bands would be super good.
Well,
but it's I feel like the quality is being lessened while the quantity is rising. But
there's no risks. The music's all the same because they figured out what worked.
What works in this new era of not having to think as much about what you listen to or watch or view.
Yeah, they made the formula and they've refined the formula down so tightly that it all just sounds the same.
Which is crazy that's across the board. I feel like in music, because again, like at this point, almost all country music's very similar. Like pop music is all very similar. Again, there's not too much rock that's being released today, or at least if it is, it's much more underground and much more seen. But like these sections of music or these genres of music, they're all just in their own like they're all so similar.
Well, so my brother was talking to me about this, and yes, I do have a brother. He little Tim Allen there. So he's like, we're both not really country fans. So he and I have very similar music taste. But we're both not really super country fans. Like I do listen to some country, but I'm not just.
I'm sure you're not listening to stadium country all the time.
I don't just listen to the country, just like all country music. Right. I have very specific artists and I use that music somewhat.
Taylor Swift, Rascal Flatts.
Oh yeah. No, I listen to like Zac Brown Band and like what's his nuts. I don't listen to enough. Apparently, I don't remember his name. Anyways,
I know people from other parts of the country are going to be like, "Did he just say what's his nuts?"
Yeah,
which is a common thing to say around here, but not in other parts of the country.
Well, yeah, what's his nuts? Anyways, so he good old what's his nuts.
Good old what's his nuts. Listen, everyone else in other parts of the country, they have their own weird sayings. We say what's his nuts.
So maybe we're just the weird ones. Even in our own area.
Maybe that's the case.
Anyways, he said that he had a new company car and he wasn't listening to, like, he hadn't got his phone hooked up to it or whatever yet, so he was just listening to music on the radio. And he said he just gave up on trying to listen to the main rock or like pop stations because there was no good music on there. Top 40 so he jumped to country, and he said that country has become so un-country music because they want to appeal to the masses that it's now just drifted into just kind of bland rock.
Yeah, he's like bland rock and pop.
It's bland rock with its little twang. He's like, I can handle that. That's what I've been listening to. It's also a little more wholesome instead of being like talking about going to the club and hooking up with strange women with doing strange things under strange influences. Yeah, they're just like, oh, my truck, my dog.
So Bo Burnham's thinking about country music.
Yes, he's so good.
A nice truck, and it's like
dirt
road,
good dog,
exactly,
front porch,
and basically it's just like you have your hook, and then you have this super bland chorus, and you have these verses that don't actually say anything. Yeah, and you got to think of like the George Straits of the world and again, where he just had this incredible real country music, or like, again, you have these other older country artists. How, like, what do they think of when they look at country music today? They have to be so disappointed in that. I feel like country music was created to give people that wanted that feel of music their own thing. Like, country music was made for people that wanted country music, that wanted their own genre of music, that were living this lifestyle that every other genre of music didn't get or capture. And now country music has shifted to the other genres of music. And I gotta believe that these older country music people that were making music in the 70s and whatever, and when country music was much more real, are just so disappointed in what country music has become.
Well, I also think, if you listen to country stations, which shout out to Froggy, and if you don't know what Froggy is, go to any episode of The Office where you have a side shot of Dwight and you have his file
That's
camera to
right.
his left. Right there, you'll see a Froggy
That's
sticker.
right.
Froggy is a country station. It has a far reach on the country, but I don't know if it's everywhere, and it's definitely not in Australia or Brazil where we have some listeners.
Yes, we do.
But it's a country station, and we actually have, I think, 2 or 3 Froggy stations here.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they have multiple Froggy stations.
Mm-hmm.
It's country music, but if you listen, like, it's only like 1 of every 5 to 10 songs is actually a new country song. They really recycle old country. They just really, once they got a hit, they're like, you know what? Everyone loves this. We're just going to keep playing it. Like, you can still hear George Strait and like older country. They'll still like throw out some Johnny Cash for a little more Southern rock.
Yeah.
On there. And, it's like, come on. It's just, they figured out, these songs still work. They still apply. People still love them. So we're going to keep playing them. Like, they don't do that you'll every once in a while, like, throwback to 2012
Right.
on the pop station. You're like, are you kidding me? Like, I remember when the song came out. This is not old.
Oh man, where does music go from here though? It's been on a downward spiral for
I
darn
think,
close to a decade.
Honestly, the big killer is when radio truly dies, and again, that's really going to happen as cars keep getting because right now you don't buy a car that just has a regular radio in it. They all have Bluetooth and hookup for your phone. And that's what everyone does. Like, anybody with a new car doesn't just bump on the radio unless they've just hopped in and they didn't feel like flipping out their phone because they're driving 2 minutes. Mm-hmm. But once pretty much all the cars have hookups for phones and people aren't listening to the radio because they don't have a radio in their car that can play with their phone. Anybody who has like a 90s car in early 2000s, once all those are pretty much gone, the radio is going to die because any place now, like before, you had the radio in your car and you had the radio like in stores and stuff. All those stores now make their own music, or not like their own music list. And and you hear pretty interesting artists on there. And most of the time it's because the corporation is paid for 25 songs and they can use them in all their locations, and they pick music that's very, bland and unassuming and uncontroversial, and that people recognize that they just throw in the store. If you go into Kohl's, you go into Macy's, you're not hearing Post Malone, you're not hearing Ariana Grande. You might hear one of her songs,
right.
The one that's the most unassuming.
Right.
And you're going to hear that for the next 5 years because they paid for the rights for it, and they're going to milk it for all it's got because they just want to have. But you also hear, old songs. You'll hear old Green Day on there because I know there's some people who like that.
Yeah.
But so they're not playing the radio. You're not hearing Crazy Ira and the Douche talking about stuff. It's just music. And once there's no one who is easily access to the radio, it's just gonna die.
Yeah.
Like, there's gonna be no money coming in, so no one's gonna do it. And then it'll be. You might have like 1 or 2 stations that are like holding on, but they're gonna pick music for the people who still listen to radio intentionally, and that's gonna be older people. That's gonna be the people who want to listen to older music. Good old AM radio.
AM radio. Have you ever listened to AM radio? What is on AM radio?
Usually a lot of like news and stuff, and it's always a lot more local because AM doesn't have quite the range of FM.
Right.
If I remember correctly.
I wonder if we can get on AM radio. Broadcast live.
Maybe we just get an AM broadcaster and we just find a station that's not being used and just pump it out. Not like anyone's monitoring it, it's going to care.
Right.
FCC comes in. You were using an AM station.
Great.
Sorry. They'll be like, don't do it again. Yeah. Whatever. It's just. Radio is such a weird thing, but again, it'll die. It'll naturally die. Again, people are gonna not want it to die for some weird reason. Like,
right.
No one's ever been like, I really enjoyed listening to the radio today. Everyone's like, well, that's what I got, so that's what I do. I'd rather not sit in silence.
Like Sound of Silence, that's a good song. When I don't have my iPod on me in my car, I get frustrated because I'm like, I gotta listen to the radio now. Like you're right. It's never something where it's like, oh wow, I really am finding joy in this.
Yeah.
It's more, here's the same 5 songs on repeat on every station all the time.
Yeah, commercial breaks, and they're all synced up together.
They're all
so you
synced
can't
up,
avoid
which
them.
sucks.
And then
Unless you want to then like turn over to the classical channel during the commercial breaks.
Catholic channel.
Or the Catholic channel.
Oh, Holy Father.
If you want to listen to Joel Osteen, he's you can normally find him broadcasting somewhere.
Somewhere out there.
Hey, folks. Joel Osteen.
Let's just talk about the fact that also music from the early 2000s, late 90s, at least for us, it's so applicable to just conversation where you can just drop it in. Like people say something and you can just, like, again, it's been a while. Someone says it's been a while and I can be like, it's been a while.
Yeah, like so many people in our friend group and in our circle, when one of us says it's been a while, we all go, it's been a while. Like, ah, man. And you can't do that. You can't be like shape of you, love with the shape of you. Like that doesn't really apply here today, you know?
Yeah.
But back then, man, we're so old. We're such old men.
Yeah, keep talking about the old days. The good old days.
The old days.
We're going to sit on the front porch and throw rocks at children.
Exactly.
That's what old people do, right?
Yeah. Oh, man.
Also, it's one thing I think is very interesting now these days. I don't see kids walking around anymore.
Doesn't happen. I listened to a podcast. I want to say it was The Fighter and the Kid. Maybe it was a podcast. They were talking about this for this very thing. And also might have been Bird too. But like the idea of, hey, the neighborhood kids are going to get together to hang out and play and then just be home, by 5 p.m. doesn't happen anymore. Does not happen. How crazy is that?
I just don't see people walking around.
No. Like kids especially, they'll stay in their house or they'll stay in their yard, and that's it. Like they there's no venturing. Like dude, there's barely even walking. I remember when I was young, I'd go over to my buddy's house, and then we made a trail between the woods to go up to the mall, and that trail is probably still there today. Like we made a trail because of how many times we walked back and forth to the mall. Like that, but that just doesn't happen anymore, or at least it happens. It's very few and far between. Like. There's just this, and I don't know, I don't have kids of my own. Maybe it's rightfully so. Like maybe parents are just so much more aware of all of the terrible, heinous things that happens to children nowadays, and maybe there's just more predators out there today. But like,
well, again, some of it is just the,
or is it just paranoia?
Well, there's a name for it, and I forget the name of it. There's a name for the psychological phenomenon where you see lots of more bad things in the news, you believe that there's more things happening, when realistically, look at statistics. Like people think like everyone's getting murdered now. Every single like crime, it's gone down. I mean, you'll see temporary spikes where you zoom in on the graph and you see, in these last 5 years it's gone up a little bit, but then you zoom out to 20 years and it's way down. Like pretty much like everything's gone down. Like murder's gone down, assault has gone down, rape's
gone down.
Rape is super low, sexual assault is low, kidnapping is low.
Kidnapping's crazy low.
Like everything has gone down, but if you talk to parents, you'd think that right now is the most dangerous time.
So like why? So that is based off of the news putting out paranoia news. So it's like we're really only going to report on these things that are just terrifying people.
Oh yeah, some of it. The news is supposed to report what's going on, but you also got to think that so much before you didn't have this national coverage of everything. Like again, you have like the national news and you're watching whatever in the national news, but now even you have local news covering national news, where you're watching your local station. It's supposed to be covering your area, and they're like, now over to Florida where we have somebody covering this thing going on,
this missing kid. And I guess it's a ratings game, and tragedy gets ratings for sure.
Yeah. So
what's it going to take to get people to tune in? Yeah.
So now local news is covering all that. So like, and every time anything happens, there's a lot of social media just gets it all out there. Like so there's so much connectivity. So you have a lot more awareness of what's going on, which is part of the reason why things have gone down. So I mean, like people are more aware that these things happen, so now they're going to be more careful. So some of it, I understand being careful with your kids. I'm not saying that now I'm not saying you should just completely ignore the fact that bad things happen to kids and you should just kick them out the door and say don't come back till it's dark out. Like I keep track of your kids. That's a good thing. But to completely choke out, interaction with each other and exploration, I think is somewhat it's not going to help anybody. It's going to have an overall negative impact. So, but
it's making people. I mean, I think it's making people more secluded, but which leads to more loneliness, which leads to more depression, which leads to more just an underwhelming mental. So many things have gone down. The strength of mental health in our country has just dropped off. The mental health of the United States has never been worse than it is right now.
Yeah, and what's really interesting is that
but I think has a lot to do with precautions people are taking in life, which is not allowing them to live life.
Yeah. So again, if you measure mood versus action, I think action is down. I'm pretty sure suicides are down, and I'm pretty sure that kind of stuff is down, but the feeling of depression and all that stuff, so the more psychological stuff has gone up, which is interesting.
I mean, anxiety is more than it's ever been. I'm sure even during wars, it's more than it's ever been.
Yeah, so it's very interesting.
Which I'm sure social media has a lot to do with that.
Yeah, but I also think that what's interesting is people the idea of neighborhood kids isn't necessarily about creating friends for life. And a lot of the time, it's just you want your kids to have social interactions so they don't end up being weird. You don't want them to end up not understanding social cues and understanding how to interact with people, how to deal with conflict, how to meet new people.
Which are it's crazy. Our kids nowadays interact with more and more people than you and I ever interacted with ever before, but it's not face to face. It's it's through a screen or it's through a microphone, which is ironic because that's what we're doing right now, but we're actually looking at each other. But it's so kids nowadays they have more interaction with people than we ever did, and times 10. But it's not in a face-to-face capacity to where you actually have to be a person.
Yeah, they really don't like phone calls.
No, it's crazy.
Man.
It's crazy.
And I find texting so inconvenient. I'm if I just want to something that is either doesn't matter in the short term. Hey, I need to say something, but if you don't respond to me in the next 15 minutes, is okay. Mm-hmm. If I need to know something, I'm going to call somebody because it's faster, but also just how much time it takes to type out a long text. Goodness, I might get bored halfway through. And is this even worth typing out? Right. I do type longer texts when it comes to so that's I call somebody, they don't pick up, but I want to tell them something. And maybe they're either in the middle of doing something and they didn't want to answer the phone or whatever. Yeah. I'll basically, instead of leaving a voicemail, because voicemails are the worst.
Yeah.
I'll leave a text as a voicemail. That's what I'll do.
Right.
But even then, it's still, I'm just this is so arduous. You have to try to condense things down because you don't want to type everything out exactly as you would say it because it would take even longer. So you have to boil things down, and it just. Oh, goodness, it drives me crazy.
Yeah. But the question is, where does the generation below us, and I'm sure for for our generation as well, what does business look like in 20, 30 years when a generation that grew up not having face-to-face interaction and not having conversation with people, where does business change? Where does marketing change? Where does people distribution change?
First
that's
of
crazy.
all, everyone's going to order everything online, even if it doesn't come from Amazon. If you want to, even now, order pizza, you don't have to talk to anybody. You can just order the pizza, and so there's going to be that.
Which I think I brought this up on the podcast before, but it was the phenomena of the 1900s where you went from the inventions of things like the attached garage, the invention of things like newspaper getting thrown to your door, the inventions of things like mailboxes to where you don't have to go down to the post office to get your mail anymore. It's even the microwave. You can just, instead of having to go outside and cook something on the grill or having to go and pick stuff up at the store, you can just microwave something in 10 seconds and you don't have to leave your house. And the idea of these inventions are making people less and less likely to interact with people, online shopping. And you're right, you can order pizza through an app that gives you up to date of where the pizza is. All you have to do is say thank you when the person comes to the door and drops it off.
Yeah.
That's crazy. To get food, to get a meal, all you have to do is say thank you.
You don't even figure out the tip or anything. Right. There's just everything's baked in, which some of it's going to be, so that's going to be an advantage to the user, but also it's going to be a lot of advantage to the business. no one's going to negotiate anymore. Like there's so many,
Yeah.
like no one knows how to negotiate. It's hilarious.
Dude,
because,
and people don't, like, it's crazy how people don't really understand the concept of cash anymore.
yeah.
Like cash, like being able to pay with cash and getting something cheaper. Again, maybe not at a retail store that is a big chain, but like, again, for so many things that, like, I don't know, my dad taught me this when I was growing up. If you pay cash, you can negotiate a lot better. That's just not a thing anymore.
Oh yeah. That's what I do every time I buy and sell cars. It's like people just don't know how to negotiate. Like I'll go up to somebody, I'm going to buy a car, and this happened with the last car. The guy had it listed for a price. It was on Craigslist, and if you don't know what Craigslist is, it's if you're in down under, it's like Gumtree, and if you're in Brazil, I don't know what they have.
Yeah.
Hopefully they have Craigslist.
They just have exchanging things.
Yeah, they just buy. You in Brazil, you know all about cash. 'Cause that's what you got.
Yeah, like all they do is cash and they just like buy and sell and
Yeah,
trade.
they know how to negotiate. You guys in Brazil know how to do it. So, anyways, here to the United States, Craigslist. Craigslist is great, especially in our area. We have a very active Craigslist area. Some areas of the country, Craigslist is terrible. Facebook has taken over a little bit in some of that.
With the marketplace and everything.
Yeah, and so I've been exploring that a little bit, but I found a car. It was a good deal already. I'm the first guy to go look at this car. Like, he even told me this. First guy to show up. I was like an hour late due to some extenuating circumstances, but I always like to show up a little bit late on people because that gets them invested. Like if they're waiting for you or whatever, and they get that investment where they're like, they want to see this through. You kind of build anticipation. So I show up like an hour late. I let the guy know. I'm trying to get there. There's just things getting in the way. I show up. It's like nighttime, but I look over the car. My brother's with me. He's also knows how to get the deals. And so we look over the car, and there's some issues, but really it's still like, even if I only get his asking price, it's a good deal. So, we hem and we haw. We kind of like talk about the issues, and I talked with my brother, and then I started to negotiate with the guy. He wanted 26 for this car. I was like, that's not bad, but let's just see. And so I just kind of like, I'm looking over, I'm talking with him, like, I talk about some of the issues it has. I'm like pointing out this, pointing out that, and just, I'm not saying like, oh, you're a horrible person. I'm not insulting the man. I'm just talking about the item that we are talking about. And then I'm like, it's like, man, I don't know. There's just a lot of issues. I have to do a lot of things to get this ready. It's for my wife. I don't know if I'm going to be able to, if there's a lot of stuff I need to take care of to make this thing really reliable. And, it's not as good as I was expecting it to be. And he was like, oh, okay. And I'm like, can you take, I think I got to be at like 2. And he's like, and he looks at me, he's kind of like, oh, I don't know. And then he's like, can you meet me in the middle? I'm like, nah, man, I just got to be at 2. He's like, what about 22? And I'm like, nah, I got to be at 2. Mm-hmm. And he's like, what, can't you just give me another 100? Can't you be 21? I'm like, no, I got to be at 2. Yeah. And he's like, oh, let me go talk to the wife. It's her car, and I'll be back. He goes, 5 minutes later, comes back, and he's like, she says okay. And I'm like, I'm the first one to show up. It's the first day he has it listed. He has like a bunch of other people behind me. Yeah, he could have just told me no, and I probably would have paid 26. But there's just like, he didn't know how to handle it. Like, right. You could see in his eyes, he didn't know what to do. He was expecting me to just say yes to 26.
Exactly.
And I've been on the other side where I'm selling something, and this guy shows up, he looks over it, and there's a lot of things he's allowed to be concerned about. Like, again, I don't try to act like the car's perfect, because I don't have nice brand new cars. Mm-hmm. I sell older cars. And he brings those things up, and he's like, would you take less? And I just go, no. Mm-hmm. And the guy they're just like, oh, okay. And then just paid me my asking price.
Right. Oh,
there was one small attempt. I've had other people though come up, and they're just like, so you want like, selling smaller things like tires. He's like, so you want 150? And I'm like, yep. And he's like, okay.
Yeah, it's crazy.
He could have negotiated with me, because everything on Craigslist is negotiable.
Exactly.
I've gone out to people. I've gone to look at cars where they have $4,000 firm. Don't even try to negotiate. Exactly. I won't go $100 down, and I'll still buy it for less than they're asking. Exactly. And people get so confused because they try to negotiate over a text message where they're like, especially on cars, they're like, the listing is 2,000. They're like, will you take 1,500? And I'm like, no. And then they're just like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Like negotiating over text is such a dumb thing because you have no leverage in that moment. You're not there. You haven't shown up. I don't know if you have money. I don't know anything. Like why would I negotiate with you when you have no influence? I have no idea if you're going to show up. I'm not going to tell you a price that's different. I've given the listing. I've all the details. If you want to come in person, we can talk then.
Yeah.
But it drives me crazy. And then you think about like businesses, like when you talk about people bidding on jobs, like imagine now and you want to get, some work done on your house. Mm-hmm. You're just going to go online, fill out a form, take some pictures, and they're just going to tell you the price, and you're just going to say yes. Like there's going to be no negotiation.
There's no the art of the deal is lost, as Donald Trump has said. With where our country's headed, with inventions in the 1900s, and then just where digitally and technologically where we've kind of been going over the past 20 years, face-to-face interaction is a dying thing.
Which is terrible.
Business, you're right. Business does not have to be negotiated anymore, which means that people are unhappy and people aren't pleased with the way that things are happening.
But they don't know how to deal with it.
But they don't know how to deal with it. And the idea that there's no negotiating is unreal. There's never been a deal that I've made with video games that I didn't negotiate it. And it's crazy to me. Like that's so true. Like I've had people that I've met to make a deal, and like we've maybe agreed on something, and then once we get face to face and everything is looked over, they're like, well, what about this? And I just go, no. And you're right, the person crumbles at that point.
Yeah,
they crumble because they're expecting to get what they wanted. They're expecting me or whomever to kind of be like, yeah, that's totally fine. Like, so again, we've negotiated already. But when they're at that point when they're just trying to see like, okay, well, I'm going to try to negotiate some more. It's like, no. And again, people don't know how to do that type of negotiating. Where again, if there's times where it's been realistic where there should be some more negotiating, like then I'm willing to hash it out with them. But even then, like, man, like it is fun when you finally do meet someone. If you're making a deal for a car in your case or whatever, that does understand negotiating, and you can have that good back and forth. And then when you both come to an agreement and you shake their hand and you're like, you know what, I feel good about this because it was a good exchange. It was a good interaction. It wasn't awkward. It was real. This was real. Cash was in play.
I just love getting the deal. Like there's nothing like when people talk to me about stuff and I tell other people about my deals. They always look to me as if I'm just like a wizard, and I'm like, I'm not. Like, yeah, right. Like I'm not.
It's so easy to figure out. You just have to do it and do it consistently.
It's not. Again, bring back to The Office, which I've just been watching a bunch of. It's not like when Dwight gets the car from Andy, where he's like, he's like, this thing's a piece of crap. It's it's terrible.
I'm going to buy it for next to nothing.
You're going to buy it next to nothing. Do you take $50 off the price right now? Do it. Yes, do it. And then Andy's like, okay. Yeah. Like, it's not like that. I don't beat people up.
Right. We're not unfair.
Yeah, but at the same time,
we're still morally,
Yeah, but at the same time, like, yeah, I met one guy one time that this wasn't a car deal. So I was buying furniture for my wife wanted, and the problem is that this is the big thing that people have a problem. That people lose. This is where people pay too much, or they can't negotiate. Is when they're emotionally invested in getting it. Like if they can't turn away and walk away. Again, this was partially was because my wife saw this and she's like, I want this furniture. I want it so bad. And I'm like, crap. And so I'm like, okay, let's look at it. It's in Ohio, and like a good drive away. This is a good 3-4 hours drive. So at least now you know. But again, Ohio's 3 or 4 hours for a bunch of people. So keep trying to figure it out, suckers. Anyways, so I have to drive. I have to get my dad's truck and a trailer. And like, so I am emotionally, not emotional, but like I'm somewhat invested. Not emotional. My wife's emotionally invested. She really wants this furniture. So I'm like, crap. But I'm like, I'll still see if I can negotiate. I meet this old man, and it's he's had this furniture like since he bought it new a long time ago. It's super nice. I mean, this is very high quality, like hand built furniture. It's a full set. It's exactly what my wife wanted. And I'm like, crap. So I try to negotiate with the guy, and the guy's just like, nope. So I had to pay his asking price. The first time ever
that I paid. That had to sting real bad.
I paid one other time that I paid the asking price, and that was because it was an old lady who I bought a car from for $400. And this car was worth at least $1,400, in which I sold it for $1,400 a year and a half later after driving it for a while. Like
which one was that?
That was my green.
It was the green.
My green one that I lifted and stuff. Yeah, like that one was. That one was. It was a total turd.
Yeah,
but it was for $400. I couldn't pass it up. I mean, it was already inspected and all the stuff. It was great. It was ready to go. It just had one issue that I knew how to solve. It was like $30 part.
Yeah.
Took like an hour and a half to install.
Yeah.
And the car was just running like a top again.
Yeah.
Drove it, did nothing but change the oil, put gas in it, and drive it places after that. And I put a lift on it because I wanted to do something hilarious to it. And then I sold it. I sold it like a year and a half later for $1,400. And
feels good.
And like that's where you have to do. So I felt bad trying to negotiate with this lady. I almost paid her more money because like this was an old lady. She was buying a new car. She lived by herself. Yeah. And I was just like I couldn't be a monster. But at the same time, I did have issues, and so I was like I'll just pay her asking price and call it a day.
Oh man, I do know what you mean. Probably like once or twice making video game deals, I've paid their asking price because they were stubborn, but I knew that I would be able to make money off it still. But like still, you always want to get that negotiating in to make you feel like you got more of a deal. So I definitely hear that, man. Yeah,
I think about people that we know that have gone into a car dealership and just pointed at a car and say I want it and paid their price. It's tough, and I just it hurts me inside. Like I want to help people. Like honestly, I've helped people a bunch of times with buying cars, and I'm always like trying to walk into the steps, understand the process and how to do this appropriately. And they've always done better. They've always gotten a better deal. They've always, been able to find and do the process better and use their money more wisely. But when you know people that just don't listen and just like, I want this car, I'm just going to go buy it. I go, because it just hurts them in the end.
Yeah. Man. Yeah, it's tough. But like we're saying, the art of negotiations is just so down based off of where our country's headed. And like you said, for business, that's incredible because people are probably just going to start paying what people ask. Yeah. And I think people don't understand that negotiation is still available, especially or really only if you're paying cash.
I think where it's going to end up starting to hurt businesses slightly is where you can get what you want exactly without having to talk to anybody, and so people who make their business the most available and the cheapest. They're like, you look at two things you want to buy, but you have to buy them from a company. You can't just like go on Amazon order. Like you need a service. Mm-hmm. You have a big national chain of these companies, and there's one in the area, and you can just take pictures and write up a thing online, and they'll give you a quote, and it's cheaper than this other dude who has a small business doing it, where you have to like you might maybe be able to get his personal phone number and text him pictures. And maybe he'll do it that way. Like he's pretty cutting edge. Mm-hmm. But even then, he doesn't have the infrastructure and the scales to be able to provide that service cheaper, and so it hurts him. Where if he would be able to come in person, you could talk to him about the fact that this other company offered less, and you don't have to, there's just a communication where it seems like negotiating because it kind of is negotiating. Then he might be able to adjust his price to be able to be competitive. But he just submitted a bid, and then someone just said, "No, I went with somebody else." Like at that point, there's nothing he can do.
Right.
And that's where it's going to hurt businesses.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Here we are again talking about economies and business and life advice. We can't help it.
Anything and everything on the Before Work podcast. And again, please, we still have a couple more minutes left in the show. But at the top of the show, we talked about, again, how you guys can look us up and contact us. Always feel free to leave us a review on Apple. That would really help us out. We had a whole bunch of reviews that were left earlier on in the month when we first started, or I should say a couple months back when we first started. And that was awesome to get a whole bunch of reviews back then. But we were always looking for more positive or negative. Hopefully it's positive.
Yeah. And people or person or whoever in Michigan, I know that right now you haven't interacted with us just yet, and I know sometimes it feels weird to do that. Like I'm not a person who always is everything that I listen to or like that I'm just starting commenting and messaging them and giving them feedback. I don't need that in my life, but we'd love to have your feedback. I mean, why are you listening? What do you like? What don't you like? Because we're trying to make this better, and I think you're someone who seems to be listening.
I love to hear a Michigan. I don't know what people from Michigan call themselves, a Michiganite or whatever they would be.
I don't know.
But I would love to hear what people in Michigan think about Detroit who don't actually live in Detroit.
Oh, yeah. It's way off to the side. It's very small comparative to the rest of the place. And there's that big chunk that's way up at the top that it's basically Canada.
Yeah. How crazy is that? So much of Michigan is, they're basically Canucks up there.
Yeah, like it's just
How about Maine people too? Maine is so off by itself. Maine doesn't really do anything in our country either. Never really makes news. Never really makes noise. You know, Maine just kind of does Maine.
It has a slight influence in elections if it's a swing. It's
Yeah.
slight of a swing. It can become a swing state in some cases.
But how crazy is it that if you look at our country, the states that make news, you got California, you got
Florida,
you got New York, you got Texas, you got Oregon. Like that's really, and that's just because Portland's there.
yeah,
So like,
Illinois, Chicago area.
Yeah, Chicago, like Illinois makes news. I guess every now and then we'll hear about Virginia just because it borders DC. But it's crazy how there's just you never hear about South Dakota.
Except for that, I remember like 2 years ago, it snowed in July, and that made the news.
Yeah, or like how often do you hear about Utah? You know, like it's crazy how so much. I you know what? I'd say Pennsylvania is probably in the top 10 states that make news.
Yeah, it's Pennsylvania definitely makes some news.
Pennsylvania certainly makes some news.
Ohio too.
Ohio can certainly make some news. But there's a vast majority of states that just we never really hear about. I mean, again, when's the last time you heard news about Alaska? You know,
Except for whenever oil spills or bear
unless
attacks.
there's some national disaster. How about? Oh man, you know what? Nah, we can end the show 2 minutes early today. I'm cool with that.
Yeah, you guys can get a head start on your day at work. Maybe even sitting in your car waiting for this thing to finish out. We'll give you that head start. Maybe you'll make an extra buck or something today.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So enjoy your work day. Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you next week.
All right, have a good day.
Forward Pod signing out.
Bye.